So, today on Rising Up by Asia Startup Network, we have Andrew Tan, co-founder of Asia Startup Network and the country manager of Wanted Singapore. Andrew was very candid throughout the chat on the stories about Asia Startup Network and how he found his way to the startup ecosystem. I can't wait for you to listen to his story. I'm your host, Jia. Check this out. So I guess I would like to start off with, some introduction about yourself. So perhaps tell us more about, who you are, what you do, and what you're up to these days.
Jerry, thank you so much. My name is Andrew, and where do I begin? Career speaking, I consider myself committed to the startup space. I've had different and varied experiences. I co-founded a social enterprise after university, and then I didn't know what on earth I was doing. So I joined a startup to learn from my mentor, who was the CEO and founder. Subsequently, I learned that, hey, fundraising is super important. And my next step was then to join a venture capital firm to learn about fundraising from investing. So through this startup tour, that's how I describe it. Timing is everything, opportunities has to be the right one. I came about Wantedly, and I'm now the country manager at Wantedly. I've been here since 2019. And it's really fulfilling because it checks three of my major boxes when it comes to my career, when it comes to my professional pursuits and ambition. And in summary, A is to be in a startup space, B is to have the opportunity to build an ecosystem, and C is something that's extremely important. I consider my North Star, my purpose, my motivation, and that is to help people help others. And I find that I've been able to do that at Wantedly. But if that's not enough, I guess I'm still a bit, what they call itchy backside. So I do a lot of volunteering, a lot of community building, and a lot of giving back initiatives. One of which is Makan For Hope that I co-founded with Elise after peak pandemic. And obviously she started Mentor for Hope first, and today we are known as Asia Startup Network. On the personal front, I'm a new dad to 13-month, a young baby. He just turned 13 months yesterday. So that's almost like a startup, another startup that I'm building with my co-founder, who's my wife, right? So that's me.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. I'm glad that you mentioned about Makan For Hope, Mentor for Hope, because I think that's also something that we would like to touch on, especially now you are also in a startup space. In your job, you're kind of building this system, to drive certain impact, and also Makan For Hope. So maybe tell us a little bit more about why you decided to join Elise to continuing developing this initiative, and also what was your motivation for driving the giving back, paying it forward initiatives and culture in the startup ecosystem?
Definitely. I think the starting point and the key factor that continues to this day is Elise. Elise is an inspiration to me, passion, ease at building networks and building communities. I learned a lot about ecosystem building from her as well. And also, I would say we are very like-minded in giving back. But the key thing about giving back or making an impact is not to just try randomly, right? There is skill and it is an art to give back in order to achieve the maximum sustained impact. And that's what I found, in Elise's initiative, starting from Mentor for Hope, which I joined as a volunteer. This was during the peak pandemic. And I saw that what she was doing was really like I told you I had three checkboxes. Literally this give back initiative had that, it spoke to me very strongly. And I thought that also she needed help. So I lent support along other volunteers. And probably none of us, when we first joined, expected how it turned out, which is immense, which is great. I think you have heard a little bit about how much we fundraise, how many founders we mentored, so on and so forth. And we caught up again after this initiative. The key takeaway for me is, hey, this is amazing, and it cannot be just a one-off, right? And as we were exchanging sort of our hopes for what it could become, I reference my past experience. I founded a social enterprise called the Show Collective. And one of the things we tried to do were community-based events. We call them events for a purpose. And the idea is we connect the community together. We give them something that, was of value, something that they like, something that they're interested in. But at the end of the day, there's a third element, which is there's a give back element. If we organize an event for sports enthusiasts to come and work out together, we would maybe charge a ticket, a door ticket, with the proceeds going to a charity for maybe the specially enabled athletes, so that they can, find their own way to do their own sports. So I drew upon this sort of win-win-win motivation and enablement, right? And Elise, she had the same idea and she wanted to do more after the pandemic. And we thought, hey, Makan For Hope is a great chance to bring like-minded people, i.e. the startup folks, together to learn, to connect, to network through, sort of in-person small group mentoring sessions. And then we added one more layer, which we felt was missing out there. There are a lot of communities, a lot of startup communities, but not many or not one of them actually have a commitment to give back. And by giving back, we mean more than just giving back to the startup community. We mean giving back to other at risk or other organizations that need extra help. It could be through donations, it could be through donations in kind, so on and so forth. One thing led to another. Makan For Hope started out with small group sessions, close network. Eventually, it exploded into like 300 unconference, 300 PAX conference with many thought leaders coming together, and we raised over $100,000 for a local charity. That was a year that blew my mind, with the next level of impact that we could create, the next group of change makers that volunteered with us. But honestly, along the way, I also got burnt out. So, because even though it's a volunteer gig, even though it's a passion project, the commitment we need is full time, right? To make sure it has a successful outcome. So I was burnt out, but that brings us to Asia Startup Network, where Elise and I are hoping to welcome more long-term volunteers and team members so that the impact can continue, and most importantly, in a sustainable manner. Yeah, sustainable to us. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, thanks for sharing, Andrew. Maybe you can tell us more about what Makan For Hope is, especially for those who are not, familiar with this term.
Certainly. So, Mentor for Hope kind of explains itself, a mentoring initiative to allow startup founders to learn from esteemed thought leaders and more, with a give back element. So Makan For Hope is version 2.0 of that. There's still that mentoring and learning session, but instead of a traditional one-on-one mentoring, especially one that was done mostly virtually during the pandemic, we now brought people together to connect. And what better way to connect people than through a good meal? Makan is another word for, dining, for eating in our local language. And we started this idea, having small in-person gatherings that usually featured a special guest, someone who people would like to meet, would like to learn from, would like to network with. And in this small group, at that time, it was like phase 2 of COVID. So we could gather in 8 people. We took full advantage of that. So small group gatherings of 8 people at an eatery. And this eatery, we would identify one that sort of needs help. What I mean by that is it could be a social enterprise that employs special needs F&B staff. And we felt that they needed help because A, F&B businesses suffered during the pandemic, and B, they are already doing something that helped another community, right? So we could make the effort go a further way if we choose to have our Makan For Hope sessions at their establishment. So That's Makan For Hope in a nutshell. Eventually, COVID curbs became stricter because there was an outbreak. So we could only gather in groups of 4. That didn't really make sense. But after that, the group size grew. So we could gather in like 10, 12, 15. And eventually we did actually in real life session. We brought together all this network together at Google. Google was one of our partner sponsors for the venue and for the food, and that was like over 100 people. Most of them attended various editions of Mentor for Hope and Makan for Hope before, and we ran this sort of reunion after the few successful runs of Makan for Hope.
I think that's super inspiring to hear because apart from a day job, I mean, obviously you are already very busy running, using like most of the hours of your day already. And apart from that, you are also spending time, working on initiatives that can drive change, drive the culture of paying it forward, giving back in this a little bit already. So apart from your work as country manager at Wantedly, also the co-founder of, formerly Makan For Hope, now Asia Startup Network, I guess we'd also like to unpack a little bit more about, who you were before all these titles. Title sounds great, but, we really want to know who you are as a person or who you were before, you're not already. Do you always know what you want to do since you were young? Or, tell us more about, how's the, younger Andrew like back then?
Thank you, Jerry. At different stages of my life, and when it was Andrew version 1.0 and then 2.0, and so on, I had different goals. Some of them were dreams, aspirations in the most positive sense. Some of them were not. I'll definitely share more. And if we were to start from my younger days when I was in school, and this was during my secondary school days, I studied and I worked very hard to enter the school. When I was a child, I was a slow learner, I was a slow developer. I think people will call me back then as a kid who had maybe a learning disability. Fun fact, if we can call it that, I only started talking at like 4 years old or something. And my parents were devastated. They thought I was unable to speak. And then when I went to school in primary one, my form teacher called my parents to meet her and advised her to, consider bringing me to another place. So that was how slow and how rough I had it, I guess, in a school setting, in a learning setting. So my mom, being maybe because of the situation, she took on a role as a super duper tiger mom. I hope she doesn't hear me call her that, but she became that person to me. And it was what I needed at that stage, right? Otherwise, I'll probably fall behind to an extent where I couldn't come back. When I went into this elite school, I took on a sport, and that is bowling. I excelled in it, came very naturally for me, and I loved it. So for the next few years, my dream at that time was to be a professional athlete. I just wanted to bowl day in, day out, night and day. I was a school captain, school champion. And fast forward a few years, I spent too much time on bowling for school, for Singapore. I didn't do well in my studies. I still went into another elite junior college, in part due to my bowling ability, if I can call it that. And I represented the school. I would say I brought them glory. I won the A division title, and I felt very proud. I was walking around in school like a champion, not in a good way. I guess I took my sporting success as a privilege, and I neglected what should be a student's priority, and that was schoolwork. And the impact on this was my academics continued to suffer. I actually retained in this junior college. And when I retained, it was a huge setback. But I frame it as, hey, I get to bowl for another year. And hey, I'm not only doing this for myself, I'm bowling for my school, right? And I'm bowling for Singapore. So that's what I told myself. And that means I didn't learn from my lesson. I still put full effort on bowling and my academics still suffered. There was another consequence to this. I behaved in an entitled manner in school. I wasn't very respectful to teachers. I guess I was probably the bad company in my school. And that was, I think, a result or a consequence of, my dream of bowling and my commitment to bowling and my neglect for my schoolwork. And fast forward, I didn't do well for my A levels. And this was the biggest wake up call for me at that stage. I knew that, hey, enough messing around, enough playing. My goals has to change. I don't think I'll ever fulfill my dream of becoming a professional bowler, of becoming a world champion bowler. I was good, but not that good as well. And now I don't have my studies to fall back on. I cannot go into engineering school or medicine school, whatnot. What can I do? I felt left behind. I felt definitely embarrassed and ashamed. I felt inferior. And I felt like I disappointed my parents. So the wake up call, sounded, and I would say it was a transformation of mindset, an internal transformation unlike anything I've experienced before, because that's when I really told myself, hey, Andrew, you got to wake up your idea, you got to do the right thing now, you got to just take things much more seriously, even if it's something you might not like to do. In this case, studying, right? I couldn't go into a local U. I didn't want to take advantage of a full parent scholarship to go overseas to study. So I went into SIM. And SIM in Singapore does have a negative stereotype. In a sense, it's not a local U, it's probably second class as far as universities are considered. That's what I experienced 100% when I entered the school. But I doubled down on my effort to make the most out of my situation. So I made sure I still got good academic grades, even if my university was perceived to be inferior. And I made sure I did my most, on the CCA front, on the community service front, on the international experience front, internship front. I did all of that, right? That's kind of the formula. 2 years in SIM, I had the chance to go to US to study. This was at University at Buffalo. Anyway, I'm talking about, what did I want to be at different stages of my life. Entering university, I had one goal, and that is to become an investment banker. It's a funny motivation because to me, I have setback in my academic journey. And now, if I want to get back on track, what is a pinnacle of career success? IB seemed pretty sexy. IB was looked upon very wow. Like everyone's like, oh my God, you're an investment banker. At least, that was my worldview. So that was my sort of, professional goal. I did a finance internship. I took a lot of finance courses. I aced all my exams. I joined the investment club, so on and so forth. So I guess I was a bit on track towards that goal, but through different internship experiences, and I guess this is a period of time where I was more intentional about who I want to be, who I can be. I guess I extracted a few key key life changing moments that could make me who I am today. One is, don't do the wrong thing. And I've made many mistakes in the past. So my guiding philosophy today is, if it's not don't do the wrong thing, then it's do the right thing. So I've constantly sought to define for myself what that right thing is, and to go full on there in that direction. And the other one is to know that I've been beneficiary of many help, many guidance, many support, mentorship as well. I feel like I wouldn't be here without all of these from all of them, including my family and more. So coming from this privilege, where I got a lot of support, I feel like I have a responsibility to give back, and that's my second guiding philosophy. Uh, you know, if I can give back, I should give back. So I think all of this, came together in a very nice package as I was in a period of learning more about myself and deciding on my direction. And that's why I'm on this path now. And I hope that the evolution continues. I hope that there will be an even better Andrew 5.0, 6.0. Yeah.
I think that's really great. Thanks for sharing that. I mean, now we know a little bit more about you beside the titles that you held. And I guess just now you mentioned about, your family supporting you as you were growing up. So I guess, especially as, someone as a teenager, your friends, the people that you interact a lot, influence you much more than you think. And another pillar is also like your family, right? Especially as you were going through that transformative period. You were navigating your sports career and also like your academic studies and what you want to do in the future. I wonder how was your relationship with your family like? Especially you were going through different stages that seemingly might look a little bit different from your peers. Maybe tell us more about that if you're comfortable.
Yes, yes. A lot of memories, and I think with all the years gone by, I look back at those memories with nothing but gratitude. But when I was going through them, I was probably, very hateful. It sounds terrible, but I think at some points of my life, I was probably a very hateful, teenager. Maybe I'm not unique, but I did go through my rebellious phase. And in my narrative, I was always, I guess, chasing my dreams or knowing what I was doing when I actually didn't. I can share a few memories. And you've heard that, I was really close with my family as a child because I depended on them a lot. I was this backward kid who was probably last to develop in his class. And my mom sheltered me. My dad is a family man, and my dad is my role model, by the way. But those are my children days, right? And then when I went into secondary school, I started to have my own independence, my own personality, my own thoughts and hopes and dreams. And with this exposure outside, I started to become a bit rebellious. I picked up smoking at a young age, like 15 or 16. My reason for smoking is funny because my classmate is a smoker and I wanted him to quit. And I told him to quit every day. I nagged at him. I still had that kind of, strong values, I thought. So I nagged at him to quit every day. And one day he told me, Andrew, stop nagging at me. You're not a smoker. You don't know what it's like. And then in a fit of, righteousness, I said, okay, I smoke and then I quit. Then you must quit, okay? And, I actually smoked for many, many years. And he quit way earlier than me. But this was a rebellious phase, a memory that I want to share where I gave my parents sleepless nights and they caught me smoking like so many times. And once my dad, he picked up the phone during an argument about my smoking and he said, I'm going to call the police. All right, I'm going to call the police now and report you. And he dialed 3 buttons. And then after a few seconds, he said, they never pick up. So I think I'm guessing he didn't call. He just wanted to scare me. But looking back, it's such a funny moment. I never talked to him about this. I'm still scared of, how he probably, thought of me back then. But I caused my parents so much grief and they were at their wits' end, right? They wanted to report me to police. Later on, I became, I guess, less rebellious. Many years later, when I became that person that wanted to do the right thing, that I just, quit cold turkey and, clean till today. And in fact, I'm very anti-smoking today. But the other memory that maybe I'll share is also one that caused a lot of grief to my parents because this was when I retained in junior college. So when I flung my exams, my parents were called down to the office and the principal delivered the news to my parents. And I guess if I were in my parents' shoes, they probably were feeling some anger, some disappointment, and even some embarrassment, right? Because they were basically being told your son is the last in school, that kind of thing. And I was with them. That was the start of my wake up call, and I felt extremely bad because if it was a mistake that only me as an individual have to face the music, I think my mindset then was like, let's do it. I'll face the music later. But other people were involved, and in this case, other people who deeply cared for me and who gave up and sacrificed different things for to help me get to guide me to where I was. And that was another sort of huge disappointment I served on a plate to them. And these were the few years where my relationship with them were at its lowest, I feel. But having become a parent recently, I'm very much looking forward to it, to those potential years of, rebellious teenagers and, delinquency. I don't know if I was a delinquent, because you have a chance to learn, to teach, to support your kid even more. And that's what my parents gave me, unwavering support. Like my dad didn't actually call the police, even though he signaled that he did. But that's why I have nothing but great gratitude for them, right? And sometimes my dad will joke to his friends, and I pick up on it, that he says, Andrew today is trying to be the best person he can. And I'm glad that he can see that. I think I wouldn't be doing that if not for all my family support and understanding and patience from back then. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I'm sure that your family been very proud seeing what you are doing these days and who you are right now, as a person. And as you said, you're trying to be the best person that you can today. So I think that's really nice to hear. Thanks for sharing. I guess now maybe tell us a little bit more about, your first entry point into the startup scene or, entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. And as I was nearing to my graduation, my classmate started to have ideas and discussions with me. What can we do when we go back to Singapore? Because we were in US at that time. And most startups, most founders are inspired by a problem and motivated by the need to solve that problem. And in that sense, the problem that we identified was back home. In Singapore, we grow up with this notion that we are all complaint kings and complaint queens. We are a negative bunch. We are not a happy bunch, right? And for me, I attributed that to a lot of negativity in new media. So back then, on social media, on the internet. And I didn't realize this until I took myself out of the negative environment where I spent 2 years in US and then returned to it. Then it hit me like, oh my God, it's true. We are a negative bunch. And at that time, there was also a lot of public discourse about what is the Singapore identity. Is there something as a Singapore brand made in Singapore? We decided to marry all of those into our mission to bring back the kampong spirit. So that's the mission of the Shiok Collective. And our name also, is a homage to, that truly local flavor. And the solutions we came up with, or what we are trying to do, first one was a hyper local, positive vibes only media platform. And you could have original content, it could be crowdsourced content. But instead of those kind of crowdsourced content platform where we see people sleeping on MRT trains, or someone complaining about Thai fun costing $10, right? We wanted to put out and also gather contributions on positive vibes content. Example, day in, day out, there are people helping elderly folks cross the road. Why not shed more light on these daily silent heroes? That's what we were thinking of back then. So media content platform. And the second one was e-commerce store. E-commerce was starting to gain traction back then. So it was an easy product to think of. But what we wanted to focus on were just local designs or local brands. And this way we can build up the made in Singapore notion. And last but not least is an events pillar. I mentioned a little bit about it earlier, but this was a series of events for a purpose. And I'll give an example of an event we did. We worked with a local florist, not your big name florist, because they have good business. Maybe a local florist who needed some help with publicity. And we sold flowers from them for Mother's Day to our community. And when we sold these flowers, part of the proceeds will go to a charity. And in this example, we chose a children's home because we were selling those flowers for Mother's Day, but these children in the orphanage in the home couldn't celebrate Mother's Day. So we ran a series of these events for a purpose. And with these three pillars, we sought to bring back the kampong spirit. And it also was our own effort to answering the question, what is the Singapore identity? So this was a Shook collective. And for me, I'm very regretful that it's no longer around today. We are dormant. And I think if I never ever do this, I will always feel regretful. But the fact is, at that time, we didn't know what on earth we were doing. We were fresh out of college. I mentioned there weren't that much resources. So my co-founder, she got a very good full-time job offer, which she took up. And for me, I decided to learn more about startups. So I decided to join a startup. And I chose an early stage startup with a founder and CEO who was open to mentoring me. And this opened the doors for me. This was the biggest stints of my professional career for sure, because at this early stage startup, I could try the entire range of roles available. I could get my hands dirty. I could manage and lead. I could do some HR. I did product management. I did everything, right? And I'm very grateful for also that journey and that experience.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So, and maybe we can shed a little bit of light on what you do these days. So, how did you end up, at Wantedly, and what do you do these days? And yeah, like, how do you feel about your career so far, and anything you would like to share?
Definitely. If I were to connect the dots a little bit, the early stage startup that I joined is called Be My Guest, and they are a homegrown travel startup. During that time, I shadowed the founder a lot. And to me, it seemed like this guy is just fundraising nonstop. Like that's a necessity, right? Like if I were to draw out his job description, I would just put fundraising. But anyway, my takeaway there was I need to learn about fundraising if I want to become a successful entrepreneur in the future. And so after a few years at Be My Guest, I had another opportunity to help set up a venture capital firm, and we were called One Belt, One Road Venture Capital. Um, our investment thesis was, to focus on the digital belt and road to bring ASEAN startups into China and vice versa. We were raising our funds. This stint lasted just over a year, and it wasn't a successful venture. And that's why I say timing is everything, because as one belt one road VC slowly winded up, the opportunity to join Wantedly came about. And when I was looking at Wantedly, first thought was, to consider whether it's a startup, because I was really just looking at startups. And Wantedly is a startup, all the way to its culture. And we are founded in Japan, in HQ in Tokyo, but I have the opportunity to lead the Singapore outfit as my own, I guess. And that was what excited me. plus a lot of the clients we serve startups. So first box, to stay in the startup space, that checked out. And the second consideration was my ambition. I have been involved in community building. I really enjoy networking, and if I were to apply that to a business, for me, I aspire to build an ecosystem. It could be my own, it could be for a company, but my definition of building an ecosystem is the equivalent of a super app. And I think what that means for a business is you need to create something, or you need to bring about synergies such that the sum is greater than its parts. And if me, as the leader of Wantali in Singapore, I can create a formula where 1 plus 1 is more than 2. That is something that, as far as professional opportunities came, it excited me. And I saw Wantali as a platform with few thousand companies and users that had the opportunity to become an ecosystem. So that was the second box. And the third one that really sold it for me was the impact, the potential impact. And this goes back to my purpose. I'm passionate about helping people help others. And Wantali, I will describe us as more than a job portal. But when it came to jobs, that's our forte, right? We are a career platform. And I was reminded of the quote, teach a man to fish and he won't go hungry for another day. And I said to myself, to my wife, hey, if I can help 1,000 people with their jobs, or I don't know, 10,000 or more, there's no greater impact, I think, right? So that was it for me. And I went all in. I met with the CEO and founder, Akiko Naka, and I'm glad that I got the opportunity to join Wantali and to lead them outside of Japan. And a little bit about Wantali, how those checkboxes have worked out and what I'm doing at Wantali today. I had all these sort of grand ambitions. First day of work, I literally skipped into office. I was feeling top of the world, but that was in 2019, and 2020 we all know what happened. COVID happened, and that was the worst for our business because we are a B2B platform that helps companies with their employer branding and talent attraction. And during COVID, no companies were interested in employer branding. Zero companies were hiring, right? They're like, don't talk to me about, doing employer branding. Like, I'm thinking about laying off people. Come on. So it was really bad for our business. And a lot of, the plans, a lot of my ambition were stalled or changed, right? But I'm grateful that that impact, that my personal motivation to help others could still be realized, could still be fulfilled. Because while we couldn't help companies, there were a lot of job seekers that needed help. They were either retrenched or they needed a career change, so on and so forth. The fact was we couldn't help them find jobs immediately. There were no jobs for several months, but we could help them with career development. And a lot of these we did basically pro bono. And of course, in parallel, I also took quite a bit of personal time out to help Elise, first with Mentor for Hope, and then later on to Makan For Hope, all of which were, the first 2 years of the pandemic. And it was the itchy backside, motivation to recognize that, hey, if I'm okay, if I'm still quite comfortable, I can help. And the fact is there are a lot of people that needs help. So let's do the right thing and let's give more so that those who have less can pull through. Hopefully, they can flourish eventually. And today, our focus goes back to employer branding. Reason for that is it's our origin, our starting point. The mission at Wantali is to create a world where work drives passion. And we believe that is key. This mission is key because it's not enough to just attract talents to work for your company. You need to retain them. You need to attract the right talents and retain the best talents. And a lot of this has got to do with employer branding and then extending into employee engagement. All of which is basically being a good employer, right? So for me, our mission translates into that, the true essence of our mission. And that is to inspire good companies, good employers to create a great environment for their talents. And it only serves them well because then you can retain your best.
And I guess as we're wrapping up, I would like to. Well, I mean, we spoke a lot about your your stories in the past, how you're growing up and your career, so on and so forth. But I would also like to ask, you this question. So, like, what's something that you are proud of these days? Tell us more.
The thing that wakes me up every day is my baby boy. And I mean I laugh because it's not always by choice. Sometimes it's just smacking my face. We're co-sleeping now. That means he's sleeping on our bed. And this journey, so fun fact, when I interviewed at Wanterly, and one of the questions was asking me what I was most proud of, and my answer was getting my wife to marry me. Like, there's a whole story there, and she's the greatest motivator in my life. She inspires me to to be brave, right? And my point there is, we have been on this family planning journey a few years ago, and we were very intentional about it, and we put a lot of work into planning for a family and now raising a family. And I'm very proud to to be co-parenting with my wife for our baby. I think the joy he brings us. Obviously, he doesn't need to do anything. We are already very happy. But when we are so intentional and so dedicated to raising him to be someone who can give kindness in this world. I know he's just 13 months, but that's our mindset, right? I think that's what I'm most proud of. And I suppose any parent will say it's not easy, and that's the fact. But more than 13 months and counting because of the family planning stage, it has been a journey that brought me and my wife closer than ever. And I think we are also doing a lot of right things here so that our son will become someone who can grow up to be who he wants to be in the best way possible. I feel that's my current frame of mind, and that's the first thing I have when you ask this question. Plus, I told you my dad, he's always been a family man to me. And I think in this regard, I also take after him. Like he didn't need to teach me to be a family man. It's all I know in in parenting for the longest time. And that's something I'm also proud of.
Yeah, nice. And last but not least, I think we talk about the podcast name internally a lot. And at the end, we decided to settle with this name called Rising Up. So I guess a question for you is, what do you associate with this term rising up? Like, what does it speak to you?
When I see those words, like I'm visualizing those words now, I feel that what's important is if you rise up or if I rise up, it doesn't mean others go down. We bring people along with us to rise up with us. And I think that's why we are super appreciative and supportive of this podcast as well, because we hope that from some of the content that we create together, it will achieve that goal to help people rise up together.
Nice. Loved it. Thanks for sharing that, Andrew. And I guess we are at the end of the episode. So thank you so much for sharing. I hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we definitely have learned a lot about you. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Thanks for listening to Rising Up by Asia Startup Network. If you stay to the end, please give Rising Up a follow on Spotify, YouTube, or whatever platform that you listen to this on. We loved it, and thank you from the bottom of our heart for your kind gesture of paying this forward. You can also find Asia Startup Network on LinkedIn, where we regularly keep our community posted on anything exciting, relevant, and helpful to the Asia startup ecosystem. And we'll see you again very soon.